the Gilders art in 17th through 19th century France. My 3 years of living in France and additional study and scholarship over the last 10 years have brought me to deliver this discussion of the evolving wood gilding styles and techniques in France during the late 17th through 19th centuries. It also draws parallels between the Gilders art and major art historical trends of the period. Details of craftsmanship such as gesso, recutting, colors of bowl, and leaf will be discussed here today. French 19th century gilding reflects the major art historical societies styles of the Baroque, Rococo, and the Neoclassical periods. But it has also developed in its own internal history. The development of gilding in France went from a derivative style to one of incredible refinement, preeminent in Europe. Gilding during each period shows distinctive characteristics: the treatment of the gesso, the colors of both the bowl and the leaf, and the balance between the burnished and matte gilding surfaces. To understand the 17th century developments, it is necessary to step back to the late 16th century. Between the death of Henry III in 1859 and the ascent of Louis XIV in 1643, French decorative arts were part of a great international style flourishing in the grand courts of Europe. Henry IV, reigned 1589 through 1610, invited French artists to work at the Louvre as artist privileged douars. Royal patrons imported furniture from Italy, Spain, Germany, and the Low Countries. The design of interiors was entrusted to painters who were much influenced by many of the great Italian artists who embellished rooms with richly painted panels, draperies, mirrors enclosed with elaborate moldings of gilt wood. Against this backdrop stood the furniture, which was somewhat stiff in architectural and design of the period, having fringed and tasseled upholstery, and relied little on gilding until now. Early in the 17th century, French gilders began copying their Italian counterparts. Much of early gilding processes revolved around Venice, the powerhouse of the world. They used a fluidity applied gesso to achieve rounded and flowing effects, over which they usually applied a red-brown bowl or a cool green gold leaf. The objects that they gilded had already been through 3 major stages of production. The wood had been shaped by the menuisier, the chairmaker, and sent to the sculptor or woodcarver for fine carving, and then sent to the peintureur, the paint gilder, whose most skilled workmen did reparu, or recutting the gesso, in the gesso whose details the carver had originally just outlined in the wood, not in great detail. This was done with recutting irons, hook-shaped hand tools that cut on the pull stroke only. As styles changed, so did recutting. Thus, each period of French gilding had its own style of recutting with characteristic strokes and craftsmanship. The application of the leaf is the second trait by which the period of French gilding can be distinguished. Throughout the 18th century, gilders steadily increased the precision with which they laid their leaf. As is particularly evident today, the areas of worn leaf on which the lap marks are now visible. The very broad and haphazardly overlay seen during the Baroque period, roughly 1650 to 1777, gradually gave way to a precision, regular overlay that was about 1/8 of an inch during the Neoclassical period that was dominant at the end of the 18th century. This was also a consequence of the nature of carving on the surface to be gilded. Flat surfaces, which were fashionable in neoclassic designs, allowed for technical precision, whereas carvings with high relief, such as were characteristic Rococo treatments, necessitated wide overlaps of the leaf. Baroque furniture owes much to Louis XIV. He reigned from 1643 to 1715, but did not take control of the government until 1661. who was determined that the arts in France should dominate Europe. With his finance minister, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, he engaged artist Charles Lebrun and architect Jules Mansart to realize his ambitions. In 1663, Louis XIV set up the Manufacture Royale des Gobelins, named Lebrun as its director. He made it a center for the manufacture of all decorative arts and bringing together the finest craftsmen from all over Europe. He set up concourse for them to come, contests for the best of Europe. These artists were actually waiting on the outside of the various ports of the walled city of Paris. Many of these immigrants were chosen to work with the king's cabinet maker, André Charles Boulle, a Frenchman of Dutch descent, the great furniture maker. The gilded wood furniture made during these years was characterized by grand, formal, and even pompous design. It was highly architectural in quality, with a rigid balance of straight and recto curved linear lines. It too was international in scope, but many of its motifs had been developed in France and were spread from France to Holland and England by Daniel Marot, a French Huguenot who fled France during the revolution of the Edict de Nantes in 1685. The specific design of gilded French furniture of the late 17th century reflected life at court, where etiquette dictated that only the highest-ranking members of the royal court be given armchairs, and other simple chairs for the proletariat. The seats were set high in an attempt to add grandeur to their human body. The upholstery was very elaborate, often with appliques of gold thread added throughout and luxurious tassels terminating the fabric. Yet, as in the early part of the century, only the legs, the stretchers, and occasionally arms were carved and gilded.